A prank phone call has resulted in a very real fine, both for the Atlanta Falcons and for defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich. If you haven't already heard the story, on Friday night, second day of the draft, a prank call was made ostensibly by Saints GM Mickey Loomis to now Browns quarterback Shedeur Sanders, informing Sanders he was going to be picked by the Saints. It quickly turned out to be a fake and phony phone call. He wasn't the only one, more on that in a second. But this one was as high profile as a prank call is ever going to get. And we found out on Sunday that it traces directly to one of the NFL's teams. Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich had supposedly an open iPad that his 21-year-old son Jax saw the Shedeur Sanders phone number, took it down with the intent of making a prank call. One thing leads to another, and the crap hit the fan. So the Falcons will pay $250,000. Ulbrich himself, $100,000 for failing to protect confidential information. The NFL had to do it because it was such a big deal. Maybe if it had been any other player, it never would have even gotten to this point. Maybe the Falcons wouldn't have figured it out. Social media was ablaze with different theories and ideas, and there were enough breadcrumbs out there that led back to Jax Ulbrich that made it easier for the Falcons to investigate the situation. So the planets lined up perfectly for this to all come to light, obtaining the confidential information, using it, and then being a little too overt on social media about how this all came to be. Now, with all that said, the NFL has responsibility here. This is need to know information. It went to people who didn't need to know it. They distributed the updated Shedeur Sanders phone number last Wednesday, April 23rd, to everyone who gets the daily transaction report. Everyone, all coaches, all assistant coaches, all general managers, personnel executives. People who didn't need to know this number knew this number. So the NFL does have some indirect responsibility for what happened here, and I hope the NFL will tighten up its procedures moving forward. That still wasn't enough to get the Falcons a pass. $350,000 total fine. Again, $250 for the Falcons, $100 for Ulbrich. They're not going to appeal it. They accept it and they move forward. But the real question is two things. One, will this work? And I'd like to think it will, because if somebody does it again, I have a feeling the punishment is going to be a lot more than it was this time around. But also, will the NFL take this to heart? And will the NFL ask itself, and really, I don't know how the NFL can prevent this from happening, but how is information that isn't known to the public being protected by the league and its teams? We only know about the Shedeur Sanders prank call because it was a prank call that became a big deal. How much other confidential information is falling into the hands of people who see open iPads, who a 21-year-old who's got buddies who might be using their phones to make some bets? How much inside information is getting out about who's really injured, who isn't, what the game plan is, who's going to get the ball, who's not? It might sound ridiculous, but it really isn't. And this is something the NFL needs to worry about because, look, we know about what happened with Shedeur Sanders. We won't know that somebody took advantage of knowing a little something maybe they shouldn't. That's not as easy to figure out as this was. That's a concern that I think the league needs to have moving forward. But as it relates to prank phone calls, yes, the information needs to be tightened up. And it makes me wonder, will they explore aggressively how Tyler Warren, the Colts tight end, was prank called when he was reached by someone claiming to be the Jets at the number 7 overall pick? There were other players who have been prank called this time and previously. There was one player who was called after he was drafted and he was told he'd been traded. Some of this may be impossible. Some of it may not be coming from anyone connected to the league. But this case shows that there are pathways for confidential information to be obtained by someone who shouldn't have it, and then that information gets used. In this case, the league had no choice but to do something. And there will be people who wonder whether or not the Falcons did get some sort of lenience here because of Rich McKay's role as chairman of the competition committee. Think back to when the Falcons were caught red-handed using fake crowd noise. The punishment, some would say, didn't fit the crime. The Falcons seem to get a slap on the wrist for what, to me, was one of the most blatant instances of tampering we've seen as it relates to the acquisition of Kirk Cousins in free agency a year ago. The McKay factor, people around the league believes, helps the Atlanta Falcons. And maybe it did here. The only way to know would be to compare it to the punishment that another team got for the same thing, and that has never happened yet. And again, if this ever happens again, you could say $350,000 total is the precedent. I think the NFL will be even more harsh if someone does it again. And I fully expect that next year there will be warnings issued in memos distributed by the league before the draft. And hopefully the league will tighten up who gets those phone numbers. At most, 3 people needed: owner, GM, and coach. That's it. You could argue that only one person per organization needs it. And the ultimate solution, as we previously suggested, just do these calls on FaceTime. Then it's obvious that someone's getting pranked from the moment they pick up the call. Either way, one of the craziest drafts we've ever seen, with layers and levels of nuttiness. Now we finally resolved. End of the day, here's the punishment: $350,000 total for the Atlanta Falcons and defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich for allowing the number to get out that resulted in one of the most notorious prank calls the NFL has ever seen. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.